Alright guys, how's it going? And welcome to another video. Now I want to do a video today on an upcoming UFC event. And that of course is UFC 217. Now the reason why I want to do a video on UFC 217 is because UFC 217 will have the long anticipated matchup of George St-Pierre versus Michael Bisping. And stylistically, that's a very interesting match. Because on the one hand, you have George St-Pierre, who has real good timing. He could take people down at will. And on the other hand, you have Michael Bisping, who's a real good striker. So stylistically, that's a good matchup. And that's the reason why I want to see this one. Now, my own prediction is I believe George St-Pierre will win this. And I think he'll win this in the same fashion that he won his last matches that he had before his 4-year layoff. I do think St-Pierre will take Bisping down and grapple with him on the ground for 5 rounds and ultimately end up winning a decision. That's what I think is going to happen. But who knows? You know, Michael Bisping is a very tough fighter. He is the middleweight champion. And I never thought he would be the middleweight champion. I was kind of surprised when that happened. But Michael Bisping is definitely, you know, a fighter that no one should take lightly. You know, he's a very tough fighter. He's proved people wrong a lot of times. And he's the middleweight champion. Now, George St-Pierre is usually a welterweight, but he's moving up from 170 to 185 to face Bisping. And Bisping, a lot of people say, will have a size advantage in this matchup. Now, I've heard some interviews with Chael Sonnen where Chael Sonnen has talked about this. And Chael Sonnen has competed against both George St-Pierre and Michael Bisping. He's even had a UFC match with Michael Bisping. With St-Pierre, I believe he's just sparred with him. But Chael Sonnen has said that George St-Pierre is the stronger of the two. Although Michael Bisping is bigger, according to Chael Sonnen, size matters only when there's strength involved. If the guy's just bigger and not stronger, that's not really that much of a factor. And, you know, I think he may be right with that. You know, George St-Pierre is smaller, stronger, he has more athleticism. So, yeah, who knows, you know, who will end up winning this. You know, Michael Bisping does have a reach advantage, but a reach advantage is only effective when the fighter knows how to use it. And Michael Bisping does know how to use his reach advantage. You know, he's got a real good jab, just an all-around excellent striker. So, yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting one to see. You know, like I said, George St-Pierre has had a 4-year layoff. And ring rust is a real thing. It's not as much of a real thing if the fighter's been training the whole time, which I'm not sure if George St-Pierre has or not. But it definitely is a real factor if the fighter has not been training. So, definitely be interesting to see this matchup. I know there haven't been a whole lot of real big matchups this year. There was Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, but, you know, that was a boxing match. The only other big UFC event that I could think of was Daniel Cormier versus John Jones, and, you know, that was a good matchup, but this is another big one. And as far as I know, I've heard that the numbers for this event were not that great, that it hasn't really been selling a lot. And people speculated a number of different reasons as to why this may be the case. I know one of them is the fact that there are a number of UFC fans who've only recently gotten into the sport, and they're the ones buying the pay-per-views now. And these are people who got into it when Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey were becoming popular. And a lot of these newer fans are not really that familiar with George St-Pierre. So, yeah, I mean, that certainly can be the case. Other people believe that the event will sell, but it'll sell closer to the event actually happening. You know, as it gets closer to the event happening, more people will purchase it. So that could be the case as well. But it is interesting because the UFC is the kind of thing that sort of goes up and down. You know, it'll be big one year, then not that big the next. I know 2014 was not a very good year for the UFC. There were a lot of cancellations, a lot of injuries. 2015 was better. 2016 was a really good year for it. And 2017 has actually not been that great. There's been a drop-off. But it could pick up again. You never know. The UFC is kind of a strange thing in that it can become real popular and it could decline at any given moment. And I've always felt that Dana White realizes this. He knows that it could go away at any moment, or it could be huge at any moment. But it is a fairly new sport. It's not like baseball where you have, you know, people, families that have been fans of it for generations. You know, the UFC is different. It's the kind of thing, like I said, it could decline at any given moment. You never know. But yeah, there have been another few other reasons as to why there might have been a decline. I know one of the reasons is the fact that a lot of the major stars of the UFC have left the sport, like Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, Matt Hughes, Brock Lesnar. You know, the list pretty much goes on and on. Rashad Evans, Anderson Silva, although he may have some more fights, I don't know. But yeah, Chael Sonnen, although, you know, he's in Bellator now. But yeah, you know, the UFC no longer has a lot of its major fighters. You know, they still do have Conor, but, you know, they need more stars. They need more charismatic stars like Chael Sonnen, like Conor McGregor, people who could really sell the pay-per-view event. That's what the UFC needs. It needs people who could really sell the event. Because, yeah, they have lost a lot of stars over the years. You know, people retiring and whatnot. But, yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, and, you know, what they do if they could create more stars. You know, I know there was that Reebok deal, and people were saying that Reebok deal made it very difficult for newer fighters to get into the UFC and have a career, because there are a lot of stipulations in the contract that were kind of tough on newer fighters in terms of, you know, getting paid and all that. So, you know, that could be another thing. You know, but either way, the UFC definitely needs to develop more fighters, because they do need more stars. There's no denying that. You know, the Fertittas owned the UFC. They sold it, and they sold it because I think they felt that the UFC is very risky and that it could decline at any given moment. And they felt that it had reached a peak and that it was only going to go down from there. And they may have been right, you know. They may have been right to sell, you know, because it could plummet. It could plummet and then it could go up again. You know, who knows what'll happen. But, yeah, just a lot of different things have happened with it. Now, I was listening to an interview with Brendan Schwab, and Brendan Schwab proposed the idea that the UFC get rid of some of its events, that the UFC should have less events, maybe only about 4 or 5 a year, and you really promote these events heavily. You know, you make each event like a WrestleMania, just absolutely blow it up. And by having 4 or 5 events, that will make people really wanting more. You know, create a lot of anticipation for the event. Because as it is right now, there are a lot of events. There's the numbered events. There's also there are those, you know, Fox events. So there's just a lot of UFC events. If they could narrow it down to 4 or 5 a year, people would really want to see the events if, you know, they had a lot of stars in them. Again, they have to develop more stars and have them in those 4 or 5 events. But the idea with this business model is it's more quality over quantity. You know, that maybe the UFC should switch to a business model a little more like that if they want to sustain themselves and, you know, continue to grow as a company. But yeah, like I said, you know, it is the kind of thing that definitely is up and down. At this event is, you know, definitely one, you know, I know that I've wanted to see for a while, so definitely one I want to check out. And, you know, the prediction I made is the one I made. You know, I do believe it's going to be George St-Pierre. I think he has, you know, what it takes to win. You know, just really good timing, and he just really knows his skills and abilities, and he knows how to win these matches. But yeah, you know, that's all I've got. If you have watched this video, as always, I thank you for watching. Have a great night.